Everybody all set?
Denver. I know it's
For Investors Choice Funding, I'm Janine Brown. We've got Paul Pedri and we've got Greg Parham. Where's Greg? Did Greg already leave? And we do private money lending. We have we have a handful of programs, and we have a couple of twists on our program. So we like to say that we have flexible lending, which we do. We really try hard to work with people to make the deal work well for them. I'd like to start with Paul, just kind of giving a little introduction. He's done way more of this business with Investors Choice Funding. He's one of the founders and been with the company from the beginning. He's done a lot of loans, a lot of deals with people, and helped people reach that level of success. So I kind of wanted him to lay a little groundwork, set the stage, talk about how we work with our appraisers, how we work with this process, and what our intention is. And then I would like to go ahead and introduce our panelists and let them talk a little bit and do their shameless promotion. A little bit of information about each of them and what they're doing. I'm missing a panelist. I might recruit an appraiser from the audience. Do we have anybody that's done appraising before in the audience? No? Okay, so Sean, it's just going to be all you.
So it's against you.
So Paul, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Great intro. That's right where we're starting with. How did I know that, Tom?
How's everybody doing today?
Good.
So as you said, my name's Paul Pedri. I'm one of the founders of Investors Choice Funding, and one of the purposes we're really here today, we wanted to talk and go through some of this stuff. But one of the really things that you know, I get, how many of you believe that as a lender we want a low appraisal? Yeah. Look at Pamela over here, way up there. Yeah. You're actually all very wrong. How do, you know, I mean, if you stop and think about it, how do we make money?
Lending.
Higher.
Lending money, right? The higher the appraisal, the more I can lend money on. All right, so really our goal is to get a good, true, accurate value. We don't want a low appraisal. We want as high as we can get, but we also need to protect our investors and keep things safe. That's our goal, is to be nice and safe in it. So, you know, one of the purposes of this is kind of really dispel, because what you'll really find out through the day, and we'll point it out at the end if you miss it, as investors down here, you know, we go through and do our, you know, comps of what we think it's going to sell. You know, the realtors have their way of doing it, and the appraisers have their way of doing it. And none of the three of them, I guarantee you, ever agree. Okay, ever. It's against the rules. I don't know what laws are out there, but rarely do they ever agree. So it's really, you know, how appraisers come up with values is very different than how a realtor comes up with it versus how an investor comes up with it. You'll find the investor realtors are going to be a little closer, but it's, you know, really to figure out what those differences are. That's really the purpose of today. And you'll find out there are some pretty significant differences in how they look at things versus how appraisers look at things. And that's really what you need to understand to be able to come up with good, accurate values, to know what you're going to sell, to know what you're going to do. Investors Choice, one of the ways we do it, just to go through real quick for those of you who aren't familiar, you know, you give us your information, you know, the basic property information, your rehab budgets, your scope of work. We turn that all over to the appraisals, and we actually do two things. We pull an internal CMA, we'll go out and do an external CMA some of the times, and then we also have our appraisers. So we typically try and pull a minimum of 2, most of the time 3 points of value. And why do we do that? You can, it's user interface.
It's an interactive meeting.
So I'll warm them up for you guys. They'll be asking questions before long. So why do we do that?
Protect yourself.
To get a good protection. You know, I mean, it's easy to, you know, like I said, all 6 of these people on the panel, you give them the same property, I guarantee you all 6 of them will come up with a different value. Okay, so it gives us a good idea. If we have 2 that are close within, you know, $3,000 or $5,000 and another one off, you know, we're pretty happy with this. But if we just do 2 values and, you know, this one's $20,000 below this one, now who do we nose off? You know, where are we? What is it? So that's what we do. So as Investors Choice, it's one of the things that we stand out with. You know, our real goal again is to partner with you, get the money lent, get you guys successful. Because if you do one loan and leave, you know, you're not happy with things, or you're not successful in your endeavor, you know, that doesn't do us any good either. I mean, we make money lending, and I'd much rather lend to you 10 times than once. It's a lot easier to lend to you, you know, 3 or 4 times when you come in. We know what you're doing, we know how you do the work, that kind of thing, than it is to start with somebody new. So that's really our goal as a lender is, A, we need to lend money. We need to lend as much as we can. But B, we really want to work with customers. We're there to help. We're going to you know, I always kind of, we pseudo partner up with you. You know, if you want my opinion, you'll get it as often as you ask for it. You know, I mean, I'm out there looking at the projects, and I'm going to tell you what I think. And, you know, Paul and Tom down there, you know, heard more than their fair share of my earfuls of what I think. But again, it's one of those where, you know, we'll go through and we're going to help you out with a project. And that's really where we come from. And that's the stance that Investors Choice has always taken, you know, from it. So, you know, the goal, number one, that to start everything is coming up with that value of what we're going to lend against. And that's what the purpose of this panel is going to be.
Thanks, Paul. Another aspect of it too that's more behind the scenes is we have investors that we have agreements with and that we have relationships with, and they're the ones providing us with the money. We have made agreements with them to be protective of their funds and not let them have losses and not have foreclosures. So if we're protecting them, we're protecting ourselves, we're in turn protecting you as well. So if something doesn't quite come in right, even though you feel you have some, you know, really strong comfort level with the neighborhood or knowledge of the neighborhood, just understand everybody's a little better off if we're leaning more on the side of being a little on the conservative side and erring on that side rather than erring on sticking our neck out or going a little too far out on a ledge. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Let's start this way and go down. I'd like to just say your name, the company you're with, and just, you know, what your business is all about, what you would like, you know, in terms of your networking needs and how you like to grow your business. And I'm gonna move quickly because I think we're gonna have 100,000 questions, which is what this is all about. And I'm going to make a couple of statements before we really get started with the questions I'm going to start with a handful of questions to get the ball rolling, but let's go ahead and start.
Okay. My name is James Holcomb. My company is the Appraisal Source. I've done a little bit of work with you guys on the hard money deals. Certified residential FHA approved, about 9 years of experience in the Denver metro area. So I guess I got into it kind of right when things started slowing down, and then it's been kind of an interesting ride ever since. So, but essentially, just business has grown. Just you know, a few really slow years, doing a lot of bank REO appraisals for banks, looking at property that they were having to take back, and really kind of getting a surprise on what kind of condition and really what kind of value these properties were. And a lot of that's kind of dropped. I don't do as many of the REOs now, and then the actual other side, refinance and purchases, is so.
Good, thank you.
Sean Marshall with Gus Appraisals, named after my very own dog. I've been in business for about the same period of time, about 9 years, and all here in Denver. I'm a native here in Denver. I've seen this city grow. I've seen it fail in some areas. I've seen it flourish in others. And you know, right now I'm actually trying to diversify my portfolio of clients. I'm looking at attorneys, specifically divorce attorneys and elder care attorneys. As that's a market with the baby boomers that's definitely going to be opportunity for appraising. I do some work for some investors from time to time. I work for some realtors on setting pre-listing appraisals so that the expectations for their sellers are realistic and that they can get their properties moved quickly. I am also FHA on the FHA panel, and I do quite a bit of work for the conventional lending industry here in town. Not as much work with investors as far as hard money, but I do understand the ARV game. I'm a sponsor member with the IRR group that meets once a month down at the Atrium building in the Tech Center. And that's it in a nutshell. Sean Marshall, thank you.
My name's Charles Roberts. I've been an investor in Denver for about 13 years. I've done probably about 12 to 15 fix and flips back in the day. At one time I owned up to 29 units when I was buying and holding up, kind of pushed that down a little bit, decided I didn't want to hold that many properties. We started a company called Your Castle Real Estate about 7 years ago that's grown to 350 agents now, so I'm one of the two owners of that. I did get my appraiser's license about 8 years ago, mostly just for the knowledge, so I never really pursued it professionally, but I did pass the test. And along the way, we had a company called Your Castle Lending, so I was a loan officer for a number of years. Right now, I spend about half of my time working with clients, buying reasonably simple buy and hold properties. That's mostly what we do. And the other half of my time just managing this growing company.
Thank you.
My name is Portia Riddle. I'm with Remax Alliance. My business is primarily with investors. I have a few clients that do fix and flips, and I have a few that are more of a buy and hold type situation. I invest myself in doing fix and flips with doing buy and hold starting next year. We do offer, staging and everything like that, and there are project managers that for first-time people, we can help you through the process. That's primarily what you do, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
I'm Tom Spaeth. My company that I do fix and flips with is Appraisal Properties, and I've been in real estate since about '88. That's when I bought my first buy and hold and fix all at the same time back in Chicago. So I started back in Chicago up till about '98. Did a great, wonderful business there. Decided it was time to move and get married and have children. Got out of everything. I was wondering how that worked. But I'm back into fix and flips now, and I also have a wholesale company, wholesaledenverdeals.com. And when I find a good deal, and it's something that I also work full time with doing commercial project management. So I only do the fix and flips part-time, so that's what I'm up to.
My name is Paul Schemmel, and I do fix and flips wholesale. DenverRehabDeals.com is my wholesale website. In the last 4 years, I've done over 125 rehabs, and I'm currently doing 6, I think 7, 6. It's hard to keep track sometimes.
Is that all?
Something like that. I have 2 loans currently with Investors Choice, and if you have any questions on rehabbing, definitely I'm probably one of the few people here that's actually got my sleeves rolled up and getting gray hair from. So please ask me any questions you have.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much for being on this panel and taking your time this afternoon too. So what we're going to see is I think the biggest variation where people are getting information from is the investors and realtors have a lot of different tools, a lot of different sources they can go to come up with an ARV, an as renovated value, as repaired value, however you want to say it. And I think the appraisers are going to be a little bit more focused because they have an industry in which they're regulated. They have a governance, the USPAP. What does USPAP stand for, Sean?
Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice.
So that title right there tells you they're going to have some regulations, some guidelines, some constraints, some restrictions that they have to operate within, whether they like it or not. And so that's where you're going to start to see where their numbers get pretty narrow and their approaches get pretty specific and pretty focused, where most of the rest of us can be, more varied and spread across more tools. So again, like what Paul was saying, not that we want to kill the deal, but we have a lot of moving parts that we're managing. I want to just find out how many in the room have had an appraisal come in higher than what you expected. Just show of hands real quick. Okay, great. How'd that make you feel?
Great, yeah.
Made you feel pretty good, like, ooh, struck a vein. How many people have had an appraisal come in lower than expected? And how did that make you feel? Had it pissed off, bad, what else?
Wasted $375.
Yeah.
Anybody else? How did it make you feel?
Well, I think it depends, because sometimes you can see how they came to that value, but there'll be other times where you've got a fixed up property that's been compared to an REO and a short sale, and you just want to kill somebody.
Right.
So it really depends.
Okay, and I agree, yeah. And so and we see all the time where you can get 2 appraisals ordered on a property, and one comes in high and one comes in low, and you're going, how can they be this far apart? And they're not even using the same comps. So my point is, what are you doing emotionally attaching yourself to the outcome of this deal in the first place when you aren't even at the closing table yet? That's violation number 1. If you're an investor, you should not be emotionally attaching yourself to this property. It should be a business, it should be a numbers game. And if there's a disparity, great, let's figure it out. And that's what Paul is really good at, and what our appraisers are really good at and willing to do with us is, hey, if there's obviously something not quite fitting here, we'll figure it out, we'll work it out. But at the end of the day, we're going to come back to, we're going to protect ourselves, we're going to use numbers that we feel are realistic, and we're going to use the comps out there that make sense. So where did you guys get your values from? I'm just going to ask maybe 2 or 3 people in the audience. When you got your own value and it didn't match the appraisal, where did you get your values from? Anybody? Go ahead.
I like to look at public records
Why is that?
because it's going to include for sale by owners, which are not always going to show up on the Metro list.
Okay.
And I can do a search. I can look for a trend.
Okay.
I can look back. Because Metro list only goes back 36 months.
Okay.
I can go back for a longer time and see, hey, this thing's coming down, this thing's going up. See what's going on.
Okay.
And I've pulled 20 plus years worth of data out of one area and put it into a spreadsheet and analyze it.
Okay. Anybody else? What have you used? Somebody use Zillow? Okay, don't even raise your hand. So what made you feel that you needed to have a specific number in your head to begin with? A lot of people will say, well, I would think this should come in at whatever, 250, let's say. I think this should come in at 250. What made you feel you had to have a certain number as opposed to saying, let's see what it comes in at? Does that make sense? You kind of see where I'm going with this? Instead of saying, it's like going to a garage sale looking for a specific item. You're probably not going to find it, as opposed to go to the garage sale and see what's there. And that's what markets are. Markets are, there are certain properties that are selling, there are certain properties that are sold, and it is what it is. The comps are either there or they're not. They're not going to become, you know, they're not going to just appear just because you need them to appear. So that's what I'm hoping that we'll cover. The level of training and the industry rules and the criteria that appraisers go through are I can't recommend enough if you can take an appraisal class, and there's lots of places where you can get into an appraisal class and just learn a bit about some of the adjustments and restrictions that they have around adjustments that we're not doing as investors and even realtors. We're not looking at adjustments. We're not putting things side by side and saying, well, is this too big a difference? And we're using comps where there really are different enough. And another thing that is an additional layer of criteria and restriction and guidelines that they go by is if you have a property flipping, then there's two people you really care about and should care about more than anybody else, and that is your buyer's inspector, right? And then your buyer's appraiser, because at the end of the day, your buyer's loan has to make it through underwriting. So their appraiser knows how to do that, and their appraiser is going to select their comps based on which ones they know are going to make it through underwriting, which ones meet the criteria, meet the guidelines, meet the underwriting guidelines, and they've had enough appraisal reports come back to them saying, nope, this isn't acceptable, this isn't done right, we want this, we want that, we don't want this, we don't want that, and then they redo them, and then after a while, they know exactly what underwriters are looking for, and your buyer's not going to get closed unless that underwriter is happy. So there's another layer of understanding. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and start with a couple questions just to get the ball rolling. I'm going to have each of you answer them quickly, just tertiary, because if you guys want to delve into any one of these things in depth, then there's going to be another time and place for that, but I think we're going to have a lot of questions, so I want to just kind of get a high-level understanding out there. So for the first question, in your quick opinion, in just a couple of words, what is your assessment of what the market is doing today? You know, stable, all over the place, just kind of in general. Go ahead, we'll start with you.
Overall, I think relatively stable, but it is very neighborhood specific. So I'm seeing kind of the bank sales dropped, and then the bank percentages are going back up again, which is then putting some pressure on the prices, kind of depending on where you look.
Okay, Sean?
I'd have to agree, it's really locational, and that's probably going to be the start of every answer of mine, is it depends on your neighborhood. There are pockets right now that are doing fabulous. There are pockets right now that are still tanking, and that's it. Overall, I'd rather be working here in Denver than Florida, Phoenix, some of these other markets, Detroit. You know, we've got a real positive outlook here in Denver. Denver's a destination city. People are actually looking to move here. And so that bodes well for the housing market. In some of these pockets where construction all but stopped, we're starting to see new construction again. The builders aren't willing to hold inventory homes, but they are willing to build from contract. And when you see that new building starting, that just goes well for the overall housing market.
Thanks.
Totally agree with what they said. Let me add this. Our market is almost boring right now. So look at it like this. The average sales price right now in Denver is at the 4-year average. We're a little higher than the last 2 years, and then a little lower than the 2 years previous. Our number of sales is right at the average of the last 4 years overall. So it's very neighborhood specific. Everything changes when you get down to street level, but overall it's surprisingly stable. And that's the message that we've been trying to get out, simply because we believe it's the truth. And it's not sexy and it's not fun, but it's the truth.
Thanks.
I would agree with that. Showings are finicky though right now. Wouldn't you say? Like some weekends have huge surges
We actually,
and then it's dead.
if I can just tell you, we
Sure.
actually just pulled the data. So we had about 6.8 showings per listing in September, a little bit down from the spring and summer, but not bad, and about a showing and a half per listing per month higher than last September. So right, once again, kind of right in the middle.
Yeah, and it's been, you know, it's been a little up and down, and then it's inventory is down though, so that can be helpful if you have a good house. That's the biggest thing. If you make sure that you put out the best product you can and not try to cut too many corners, you know, people are still buying the good houses out there. If you skimp, they're gonna look at the next one, you know, and go with the one that's a little bit better than yours.
As an investor, for me, it's their great time and it's my bad time because there's less houses on the market right now. The banks I've seen have been just putting out less houses. I've talked to a number of REO agents and they said the exact same thing. They're just not getting the inflow of properties, which for me means there's less properties that are in desperate need of repair, which is where my money is really made.
I agree with every statement that was made. It is a stable market. However, I feel it's being manipulated right now by the government. Another story, but it is unfortunate because foreclosures are up and properties and the inventory is down, which is a very weird scenario that I've seen it. I've seen it change actually twice already this year. So actually, I think we're going into our third change. I think you said it right, Portia. If you do a very high quality flip, it will sell. My average days on market right now is between 14 and 30, roughly.
That's awesome.
I've had some more. Don't get me. I've had one that I just took 4 months. I've won another 4 months actually. So I do have that rare exceptions.
Yeah.
But overall, the market is very stable. But it's really hard to find a deal right now, a good deal that's worth taking the risk on.
You had something else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. As far as dealing with the bank sales, a few years ago, I was almost 70-80% of my business when it really dropped was actually REO sales. So I was going into these properties for banks. These banks had no idea what they even had, and they were having appraisers to come in and actually, what do we have here? And it was anything from Castle Pines Village to your little tiny things in Aurora. Some of them have been vacant, water damage. The banks had no idea. What I'm seeing now is I rarely get an REO appraisal request for something that's already vacant. A lot of it's I'm coming in and it's just a short sale. So so the bank's just working with someone. They seem to be either have gotten control of it or they're holding on to stuff or they're kind of ahead of the game now. So it's very few that I see that are just in horrible shape at the bank, that are trash.
So kind of depending on what you're doing, it might be a good market or not as good a market as you'd like it to be. So essentially, what are the most important tools each of you guys are using to come up with your valuations? Yeah, we'll just keep going this direction.
Obviously, the MetroList MLS is our biggest tool. County records are helpful.
A little louder, guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're recording.
County records is helpful, but a lot of times the for sale by owner, that stuff, this just listed in the county records that doesn't get into MLS, we won't see. Most appraisers are not going to take the time to really go through and try and analyze, 20 years worth of data or try and find those sales. Because the other issue is a lot of times we don't know if they're an arm's length sale or not, so we're going to tend to discount them. I have no idea whether furniture was included, whether their cousins, the house sold below market because it's a family member. So I'm going to typically discount those. So ideally, we're going to be looking at the MetroList, also talking to realtors, trying to confirm things. A big plus, I think, in the industry is just the interior photos, and actually we have a lot better idea of really kind of what these properties look like, especially when you're dealing with flips and stuff, because realtors love to talk up a property and it may not be quite as nice as they talk it up as. But when you see the interior photos, at least you can get a pretty good idea. So to me, I think those are key. And then I think now even with Zillow is helpful in just you get kind of okay, well, what does it think? And then you can kind of bounce that back, go, wow, it's way off, or it's right in line kind of with where I'm thinking. The other thing that's helpful is actually the aerial shots. Now you can look and you can zoom in, you can look at this house, and you can see
Google
Does this
Maps.
thing, yeah, does this thing back high power lines, a green belt, very detailed things that you might explain why this comp got a really high sell or why this comp sold really low. And so there's just a lot more information than there used to be, so, before we even go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the aerial photos from satellite, that's huge. I mean, you can look at a house from the street all day long, and it can be well landscaped, and you might miss the train tracks that are behind the house. You pull up an aerial view, and you're like, oh, there it is. That's why the house sold for $20,000 less. And so that's huge. But MLS is my primary source. I've done away with one of my sources. Was it CoreLogic and RealQuest? I used to subscribe to that. Now I get that through Iris. And so the data I can get through Iris, a service that I pay for already, it is pretty awesome. So those are my primary tools, and just running consistent checks against my data. I'm running, instead of doing 20 years worth of data, I'm doing 12 months versus 12 months. I pull out the distress sales so I can see what arm's length sales are doing from 12-month period to 12-month period. I'll even go as far as to do quarterly analysis so that I can pinpoint the actual value trend and make monthly adjustments in my sales grids. That's some pretty fine tuning and data analysis, but I do it for every report. And that's, you just have to be disciplined in how you're looking at your data every time, and you'll start to see where you're going off. You'll start to see where you're spot on. But if you do that very deliberate analysis, you'll start to see the data talk to you. It's pretty cool when it happens.
So you guys are using some basic statistical analysis, and some of that's required in the new appraisal reports and some of the new requirements that have been handed down in legislation saying you have to have these additional reports in your appraisal report in order for you to be, again, meeting use guidelines. So,
Yeah.
Charles?
Good.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, the MC addendum is what was added.
Yeah.
Most of us, we go back further, and I will actually go back 3 years. I tend to do like a yearly, and I can look at trends, and then even do the quarterly and the bi-yearly to get trends, because they can fluctuate all over the board. So, and the data is depending on, you can't just sit there and go, oh, well, this shows a trend, and then apply a negative analysis to it, because the problem with the MC form is a lot of times it's very limited, and if you say, well, I've only got 11 cells, you can have one low cell, one high cell, and it can totally skew your data. So if you say, oh, though this is a 10% improving or decreasing, and then try and apply that to your comps, you're completely wrong. So you really have to take a step back, and if you have a real limited amount of data, it's hard to really say, well, I trust this trend. So a lot of times you kind of have to then expand it out further to try and get your numbers higher so you can get a little bit better figure. But you always have to be kind of looking at it logically and going, okay, wait.
So I want to pick up on exactly what you just said, because you guys are very good at what you do. Clearly. So I use Metrolist data, but when someone asks me, and half the people in this room have asked me at one time or another, what's the market doing, what's going to be like in a year, you know what I'm going to say is, I have no idea, and nobody has any idea. And I'd be curious to know if that's a challenge to you guys. I'm sure you guys are the best at what you do, but I believe the future is pretty fundamentally unknowable. And this is after 13 years of doing a lot of stuff, and I'm basically punting on trying to figure out the future, which is a lot of the reason why I work with long-term buy and holders. So we're not trying to figure out what it's going to be like in 3 months, because God knows what could happen in 3 months. Tom and I were just talking. You had 2 luxury condos, and then what happened?
Well, I had twice here. I had a whole 3 luxury condos that came up right a month in October 2001, so right after September 11th. So needless to say, I got my butt kicked pretty good.
And just things like this happen, So I've pulled back from doing fix and flips myself and working with clients who do fix and flips simply because I'm so unsure of being able to predict the future. That's where I've landed.
One of the techniques I'll use, well, first of all, as a realtor, any realtor is going to have a better idea of what's happening in the market right now. I mean, realtors are out there, they're fresh in the flesh, they're talking to people, they know what neighborhoods are exciting, they're getting feedback from buyers and sellers. That's your best source for what's happening right now. The best an appraiser can do is work with data that's, if in the perfect scenario, is a month old. So we're behind the 8 ball already. We're working with historic data. One of the tools that I use is I always try and figure out what the absorption rate is in the market. And to do that lets you know what the frenzy in the market is. I mean, if you've got an absorption rate of less than 2 weeks, you've got properties that are selling, you should be seeing an increase in value and sales prices in that neighborhood. Where if you've got an absorption rate that's 2.5, 3 months, that's kind of slow. If it's 6 months or more, chances are you're looking at a 5-acre ranch property out in Kiowa. That's just it. I mean, it's.
So are you
gotta
guys
look at the
making
absorption rate.
adjustments for those types of trends that you come across?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's an adjustment right there that,
Well,
let me, average investment.
I'll look at it in terms of 5 factors that tie into whether or not I will make an adjustment for a value trend.
Right.
And those 5 factors are really going to be the absorption rate, which is a function of the active listings in the market divided by the properties that are under contract and have sold in the last 30 days. That gives you a rate. It's going to vary. It's going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 months would be a typical absorption rate. I'm also going to look at the days on market. Is that trending upward or trending downward? I'm going to look at the net sold to list price ratio in any given set of data and see if that's improving or going down. And I'm also going to look at the average and median home values. If those 5 factors are all increasing, chances are I've got a market that's going upward in time, or it's increasing over time. I'm going to make that adjustment.
Why? Why is my question. We're asking you to appraise a house on its value now.
Right.
Why are you adjusting for some possible future something?
I'm not adjusting for the
Actually,
future.
let me correct that,
Yeah.
because when you're doing an appraisal for a fix and flip loan, you're asking for an ARV appraisal.
They haven't done
After
it yet.
repair value, that is not now, that's 30 to 60 days
Yeah.
from now.
Yeah.
When it's fixed up, when it's ready to go on the market. So the value that they're looking at is not today's value, it's what it's going to be when you're done with it in somewhere between 30 and 90 days.
But maybe you're the appraiser when you go to do the refinance, and now it's fixed up.
Same principle. When we go out and see a property, we're basing it on an effective date, the date that we actually inspect the physical property. Okay, we'll go out there. Well, again, as I mentioned before, the data that we work with is 30 days, 60 days, sometimes a comp can be up to 6 months old. Well, if in the data that we've analyzed over that last 6 months clearly shows increased activity and upward trend in value, my task is to appraise it on the day that I see it, but I'm using historical data. So I need to account for that activity within the marketplace that says, okay, my property on this date compared to this sale back here, it's either gone up or it's gone down just because of a function of time and supply and demand within the market.
Thanks, Sean. I missed that distinction. I was thinking you're using today's value and trying to project something in the future.
I did good in statistics in college, but I don't ever want to do that
Thanks for
again.
clarifying that.
I primarily use the MLS as well. I also have personal spreadsheets that's broken down by MLS area. And then based upon, what it is listed now, what I project the ARV to be, what I project the fix-ups to be, and then 65, 70, and 80% of that value. And then a percentage of what it's listed at and what you'd have to get to that 70%. That way I can kind of track, are the bank, because sometimes I find that the banks will list all of their properties really high in hopes that they'll get a bite of some sort, and then I can watch it go down. Or you have some that'll just throw it out extremely low, and then I can see, how much over people were willing to pay for it. And then I have it for almost the past year now, so then I can go back to what was going on before, and I have it separated by REOs and short sales. So it doesn't include regular houses, because as investors you tend not to buy from the general public.
Thank you.
That's primarily.
Primarily, I use the MLS, work closely with my realtor on that. I love Google Maps because even on the MLS, things look really great until like you pull that overhead shot, you find out that nice property sits on the back of the lot next to the alley, which totally changes its value. The other one I like a lot is once I'm doing a fix and flip, my car and my feet. I go through every property in the neighborhood where I'm going to be doing a sale. And, you know, my last property was on the market for 3 whole days with 3 people fighting for it. And it was because I walked through every property, I knew what the other guys had to offer, and I knew what I had to offer, and I priced it accordingly. So the other thing I use when I'm looking for more long-term trends is I take the data from the MLS and I throw it into Microsoft MapPoint. And I can see what the trends are in a neighborhood. Where's it? Because the main thing I'm looking for is that price difference. Where's the low stuff selling low, and where's there a good difference in price? Because if everything's only selling for $20,000 price difference between the low and the high, it's not a neighborhood that I'm going to be able to make any money in. You know, I'm looking for something at least $100,000 difference between where I'm buying and where I'm selling.
Yeah, I use the MLS primarily, and my best success is actually just going out physically driving the comps. And I kind of do it 2 different ways. I do it for my initial loan because I know things can change over that, you know, between 6 to 12 weeks of rehab and construction of that property. So a week before I list the property, what I'll do is have my agent who's listing the property for me set up between 2 and 5 showings of all similar properties, all within a half a mile radius, similar if it's a Victorian, if it's a bungalow, ranch. If it does have a garage, doesn't have a garage, if it does have a basement, I try to find apples to apples, and then I'll price my property 2% under the lowest one. So I have the nicest property and the cheapest property, and it will sell. In theory, it should sell first. So I've had a lot of success with that.
Good. So what would be the top maybe reason or 2 you would eliminate, typically that you find yourself eliminating a comp from all of the comps that you're pulling up for a particular property?
Well, I think when you're looking at comps from an appraisal standpoint, you're really always in the back of your mind, you're going, okay, how can I get this through underwriting? Because we've all had the underwriter question everything. And so you're always looking at what is going to stand out about this comp that's, you know, so if there's anything really different about it, if you've got all your sales are at 150 and you've got this one high one at 190, everything's at 150. This one, you can't put all your weight on that 190. If you do, you better have a really good reason why. Because if that, just because that one's sold at 190, and I have people that say, well, this one's here at 190, mine should be worth 190. Not necessarily, because you don't know. There could be a lot of circumstances having why that one sold at 40,000 high. And same thing, when you've got an appraisal, I've got, I can, even if I put that in there, I've got 3 at 150 and I've got this one at 190. I mean, unless I have some reason to say my house is worth 190, I don't have much argument, unless there's something about mine that's just like this one at 190. You know, so it's a lot of times you might look at that comp, but you're just typically going to maybe throw it out if you've got a lot of comps that are, you know, more in the median range. So, and same thing, we're going to be looking at comps that are ideally most recent, most similar in every way that we can. If we're in a tract neighborhood, finding the same model is great. We're not going to be looking at bank sales if we can help it. If we're in Green Valley Ranch and 90% of the sales are bank sales, then we're going to have to look at them. But you know, ideally you're not going to be comparing them. Or if we do, I'll still bring them in there, but then I just still make adjustments. Like this is a bank sale, typically sells below market, and I can track that and say, well, pairing, you get an adjustment and it works out just fine. So. But the less adjustments, because of the underwriters and the banks, I mean, they're looking at everything. So they look at the net and the gross adjustments on the appraisal, and they're on the grid on every single comp. And so anything you get, so you get 10, 15%, 25% on gross. Some banks are now even looking at 15% gross adjustments, and then they flag it and they start questioning everything. So then you have to go back and explain, why did you use this? So comps that are more similar are just going to be easier, better. So.
Yeah, it's the preponderance of data is really what we're going after. I mean, you said it perfect. A house that's selling for 190 in a neighborhood of $150,000 houses, that's the exception. And your house, no matter how much you like it, is not the exception. 99 times out of 100, your house is just like your neighbor's house, is just like your neighbor's house. And you know, from a statistical and data point, and just looking at it that way, if you don't try and attach the value from the highest house in your neighborhood you'll save yourself a lot of grief. You know, if you're in Montbello, I think the USPAP guideline in terms of finding a comp that's considered similar in size is not to exceed 25% in above grade living space. I talked to a ton of folks who will try and use a comp with a basement versus a house, a subject that doesn't have a basement. Apples and oranges there, and you'll fail miserably and lose money every time if you make that mistake. I really like to consider a comp as a like-and-kind product. You know, a house that's 30 years old is not comparable to a house that's 10 years old, even if it is similar in size and bedroom count. You've got some design aesthetics that go into newer architecture. If you're looking at using a comp that's significantly newer, try not to do that. Again, it's product type. You know, the definition in USPAP of what is a comp is what would a buyer reasonably substitute for this house, okay? And you know, a comp crossing a busy street, it might be a similar house, and that buyer might want to buy that house across the street, but to do that, he's going to have to fork over $40,000 more because it's a nicer neighborhood. Not a comp. Try and stay as much as you can within the knowable neighborhood that you're working within. There are exceptions to that, but you better know the competing and surrounding marketplace if you're willing to pull in a comp that's beyond your neighborhood. People make mistakes that way a lot, and they lose money that way.
Touch a little bit on legal bedrooms in the basement versus, you know, you have finished basements and it's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, but only 2 of the bedrooms are legal upstairs. Touch on how you guys comp those.
You know,
Appraise those.
the one example I can give you where that best supply, where the market actually will pay for a below grade bedroom, when you look at these nicer ranches that have walkouts, and the basement is egress with walkouts, and the ranch is specifically designed with a finished basement to have the multiple utility included in below grade space. In that case, I'll make a bulk bedroom and a bulk bathroom adjustment on my sales grid. But if you're going into Montbello for a fix and flip, and you've done what you should as an investor to put an egress window in the basement, it's still a basement bedroom. It's below grade, and I'm not going to count it as an above grade bedroom. I just won't. It's a below grade living space. The market values those very differently. What you will get as an investor, if you do go that extra effort to put that egress window in, you're going to sell your house a lot faster. You absolutely will sell it faster. But to say it's going to be worth $5,000 more because you put that egress window in, I don't know an appraiser that's good enough to tell you the exact value of having an egress basement bedroom.
And to add to that is, anytime somebody asks me that, well, what's it worth to put an egress window in the basement? You know, I can say, yeah, you're going to get more light. I agree with him. I think, you know, compared to, like, say you've got 2 properties that are both fix and flips. He's priced 2% under, and he's got the egress window in the basement. Absolutely, that house is going to sell first. Does that translate to mean more money? Not necessarily. It just means it sells quicker. The other thing too is that I'm always looking at it like, how can I prove that basement egress window is worth $3,000? Because it's always like, well, prove it. In the back of my head, anytime somebody says, well, this is worth more, I'm like, well, prove it. How can you tell that is worth more? Because there's so many variables, and it's really hard to say that these houses, unless they're identical in every single way, and the one sold $3,000 higher, and it's got the egress window, and that's the only difference, then yeah, maybe you can attribute it to that, but rarely are we working with apples that are that close. So a lot of times it can be other factors. When we're dealing with the other thing too is how we're dealing with basement count, and it specifically says above grade basement count. And so we have to isolate that out, and people a lot of times will say, well, I've got 2 bedrooms in the basement, and they'll try and call it a 4-bedroom house. From a realtor standpoint, realtors can put that in there all day. It doesn't matter. From an appraisal standpoint, on the grid, it's going to say 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and I'm going to have basement finish. Now, they just made some changes with the UAD now, where we have to kind of acknowledge and list out bedroom count, room count. But I'm still typically not adjusting additionally for basement bedrooms or bathrooms. I'm typically adjusting an overall basement finish percentage, because a lot of times I don't see those minor differences, and a lot of times we can't tell, because unless we're talking to the realtor and really can get specific information, we may not know, because a lot of realtors will not put specific rooms that are in the basement. They'll just say it's 80% finished. And to me, as long if the finishes are similar, you're not going to see much of a difference, whether there's a bedroom and a rec room or 2 bedrooms and a bath versus, you know.
So James, I've got a question. You said you praise that as a finished basement, no matter
Right,
what's down.
and you get
there,
money
it's
for that.
finished. Okay. As an investor then, if I'm trying to run comps, I'm looking at it as a 4-bedroom there, 4 bedrooms here that have sold. That's going to be difficult for me, yes? In other words, this one has 2 bedrooms and a finished basement. I'm comparing it to this one that just says 4 bedrooms. I don't know where those 4 bedrooms are.
In the MLS, it should tell you by floor how many bedrooms
What
there are,
floor
so then you
they're
can
on.
see,
Okay,
then you
right.
can see, okay, yes, this one has 2 finished bedrooms in the basement and 2 upstairs. Still has 4 bedrooms, and if the other one has the same layout, you can use that as a comp, in theory, correct? Or, on an appraisal, I only know from what I would do, but if it, you know, same ranch, 2 bedrooms upstairs, 2 downstairs, that would be something you would compare it to, correct?
Okay, so what we're saying
But your
then,
value is not going to be the same as it would be if you had 4 bedrooms upstairs.
Stairs, correct.
okay, that's what I was asking. So
Okay.
if I've got these houses that all say 4 bedrooms, but mine has 2 down, I'm gonna knock down
Discount
what
it.
I feel the value of mine probably is compared to
Most
these
likely, sure.
others that have 3 or 4 on a main floor.
Yeah.
So when I put together my rent analysis, that's the one scenario where I can see, and I actually will count the below grade bedrooms towards the value of a rental property. And that's because in most markets, houses rent based on their bedroom and bathroom counts.
Ah.
And you can actually break out the value per bedroom in a house that has basement level bedrooms. And so I will, in my rental grids, I will count every bedroom the same,
That's for
but in my sales grid in the report, I have to break it out above grade and below grade. But in a rental property, and if you're buying these homes to rent out, you know, definitely throw your egress windows in to cover your butt as a landlord. But, you know, count those bedroom basements. You know, a ranch with 2 bedrooms in the basement can rent for as much as a 2-story house with no basement with 4 bedrooms. The utility the market sees in a rental atmosphere is a little bit different than when it sees when it's buying and selling.
Charles?
I think the 2 main things I look for are style and condition. So don't comp a bi-level to a 2-story. Does that sound about right? And you see that. And then condition, don't comp a fixed property to a bank, you know, bank repo, right? But I think the bigger issue is this, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but not a day goes by when one of my agents doesn't call me in distress and says, I've got a listing or I've got something that won't sell and I can't figure it out. And I'll say something like, are there any good comps? And they'll say no. So what do I do now? How do I get a scientific answer when there is no data? Well, what's the answer to that? You don't. I mean, unless you can tell me something I don't know. You guys have your systems, you've been doing this for 10 years, you're very good at what you do, but you have to rely on data. And if there's no good comps, then I have to tell them, you better be honest with your client and say there's no good comps because our clients want us to come back with some sort of scientific answer. But the honest answer, in my opinion, is no data, no science. Now we've got to figure it out from here. But don't pretend you can take no data and make science out of it. And as an investor and as having done a lot of what you guys are doing, that was always one of my biggest struggles. And now on this side of the fence, every single day I have this conversation with an agent.
One of the techniques I'll employ in those difficult situations is I look at historic data. And I wish the MLS went back 5 full years. I don't think 3 years is quite enough. I would love to see 5 years. But you can take a similar house that sold 3 years ago and find a comparable or try to compare it against a different type of house and start pairing your sales that way to see what that comes up against. Take that percentage, apply it to today's world. What I found is in using historic data and finding those percentages are static. You know, comparing a ranch to a 2-story, the value of that ranch and 2-story isn't going to change a whole lot, even though the markets go up and down. So if you go back 3 years in time and find the value difference between a ranch and a 2-story then, so you got a handful of 2 stories now, but no ranches, you can actually apply that with some logic and common sense to come up with some type of an asking price for your ranch with no comps.
But you're still gonna have to get that file through underwriting where the underwriter is wearing their, I have to have a comp in 90 days, and that's what I run into all the time.
I was gonna say, as an
Yeah.
investor,
Yeah,
there's no comps, I'm not buying. I mean, it's as simple as that.
There
I've
you
looked
go.
into areas where
It's your risk.
I can't find good sales. I mean, I think there should be there. I like those, some of those neighborhoods, and I go, I like the house, it looks great, but there's nothing selling. Or everything's selling will be selling cheap, but nothing's selling expensive, which tells me everyone's doing a buy and hold. And of course, buy and hold, that's the kind of comps you're gonna see. And so that's probably my biggest thing for ejecting a property right off the bat, is if there's nothing going on in the neighborhood. If there's not other investors in there, I'll leave it to someone else to be the first one into the neighborhood. I'll come follow them after they've had success.
I would say the same thing. I try not to include, like they said, people who, their personal residence, where they over improved it. They put the top end of everything, because as investors, we aren't gonna put the top of the line stuff in all around. I mean, you have to do what's nice within reasonable amount of money. And then as well as, I try not to comp it as closely to people that may have done work themselves on their house, because me personally, when I do investments, or clients that work with me, I tend to encourage them to get contractors to do it. We can't be a jack of all trades, Get your tile setter who can set a straight line. That's important, Or, have an HVAC person that does their stuff. Because sometimes when you try to compare it to somebody who's done all the work themselves, buyers are more savvy than what they used to be, and they can see the difference in quality.
I have a technical term for that. I call it Johnny Homeowner Hack Job.
You can call it
You can
that.
totally walk into a house and go, uh-oh.
Appraisers see it too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of investors get in trouble because they go over budget and they're so emotionally attached to the property, they forget it's a business. And they increase the sales price and it sits and it sits and they can't get out of the house. And it's like trying to catch a falling knife. Live the fight another day. Take your, take it on the chin, get down, dust yourself off, and get up and go flip another house. I'm saying it from experience. Ask me how I know. I've done it.
Yeah.
I've lost money. I get one lemon every year, and I'm dealing with one right now in Inglewood, and it's
Inglewood.
it's a complete mess. It's a complete. Actually, I'm building a brand new house. I went and the foundation fell in, house fell in, and there was a hole, and I was like, "Where's my house?" The house is gone. So I was like, imagine that. The funny part was I get there, my contractor's standing there, and the garage is detached, it's pristine. I'm like, might as well demo that too. Let's start over. And I was kidding. I had to be very clear. I was kidding. But it happens, It does happen. You're going to open walls. You're going to find things you didn't want to find. And too many investors get caught up. This is a business.
Yeah.
Remember that. Keep emotions out of it. It's brick, glass, mortar. Who cares? Sell the house, go on to the next one. If you take a loss, you take a loss. You'll make money in the next one. But you got to know how much you're going to make the day you close. That's a key. Buy it right. If you buy it right, even with this house, I'm taking a beating. I'm still not going to lose money.
Wow.
I'm not going to make the $80,000 I thought I was going to. I may come out with maybe 10 if I'm lucky, but I'm not losing money because I bought it right. And it's new construction, so I'll let you. My first new construction, I'll let you know how that turns out.
You can tell Paul.
Well, and I was going to say too, don't expect to hit a home run every
You
single
can't.
time. I think that's the biggest thing, is you get really excited when you see those, ARV values. And sometimes, like you said, there's things that come up, and don't try to go up, because it never, or
Yeah, people
rarely
get excited when they
works.
see that
How
high
many
comp.
of you on your initial budget, you run your initial budget when you go to buy it and you got this projected profit? How many of you met or exceeded that on the house that you bought?
Met exceeded the budget or the profit?
The profit.
Yeah, budget.
How many of you met?
I have met many times. I've exceeded my budget many times, almost every house. I've come on budget on one house out of 120 something.
Oh my
One.
God.
Wow. It's so hard to hit in the middle. Things change as you're going along.
The
Things
point
get
is,
stolen. I
rarely
mean,
you
it's
make
just
the
so many.
profit you
There's so
expect
many
right off the
elements
bat.
involved.
If you've got a profit margin of 30,000, rarely are you gonna cash a $30,000 check. You're gonna cash a $27,000 check or a $25,000 check.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the one thing to keep in mind when you're running your numbers and when you're doing these ARVs and stuff.
And one thing I learned about today, and you may know about it too, they're coming out with a new product called Home Fax, basically. It's like Carfax for homes.
Oh, boy.
And it's going to, people, and it's going to be offered through the MLS, I
Oh,
guess.
nice.
It was at the car convention. And so supposedly, I don't know the whole thing of it, but supposedly people will be able to see like permit information, possibly like insurance claims and stuff like that. I'm not sure of the whole thing, but it's supposed to be coming out. And it's,
That's a lot of work.
yeah, I'm not, well, and supposedly it's coming through Metrolist, and Metrolist is not like really great right now. They're having a lot of issues with all their changes, so if they try to add this on there, I mean, on your site, you probably don't see the issues that the people up here see with it right now.
I got two more quick questions. I'll run through them quickly. You guys gravitated into my next question, and it has to do with the unique property. So what are you gonna run into when somebody has a unique property? With my question, what are the most common reasons you think a property that is unique can be tough to comp and ultimately tough to sell?
When we say unique, what do, like,
Well,
you know, because
It's got some
30,000 square foot house in the middle
Yeah,
of all of
right.
1,015.
Okay.
hard,
Okay.
yeah, hardly anything else, if nothing else like it, maybe a dome house or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, you've got one that's, 30 years newer, and in the midst of all these, 1950s, you got a 1980 house built in there.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
So difficult to comp, difficult to sell.
Extremely difficult. I've got several that I'm dealing with that are unique properties, anywhere from, the 40-acre, huge rent, brand new custom home to the one that's an interior designer down in Bonnie Bray that would be worth about $2 million if it was in Cherry Creek, but in Bonnie Bray, it's actually going to be worth in that $1.2 to $1.4 million range. She doesn't care. But you look at this house and it's just elevator. I mean, everything, is top notch. And you walk through and you're just like, snap, take a picture, snap, I'll make a note of that. And you're just shaking your head. The unique properties are really tough. The thing is that if it's a unique property and I really feel like it's the $160,000 house or it's the $500,000 house in an area where there's a lot of $450,000 house, but this house just knocks it out of the park. The rehab is absolutely amazing. If you match that $500,000 house, and I feel like the value's there, it's a quality redo, everything's there, I will go to bat for you, and I will push that I do believe this house is worth more than these at $450. And I will market that, I will talk about that in the appraisal, but I've got to believe that. I can't, if it's not there, it's not there. If it does have unique features, I will identify it, because the other thing is that we can't say just to be easy and go, well, it's $450, even though it really truly probably is worth $500. We've got to look at it on both sides of the picture. And if it's backs the golf course, fronts the golf course, is on the lake, I've gone all over the Denver Metro for a comp. I've gone 30 miles for a comp on a really unique property on a lake if I need to. And yeah, it's not an exact science, but sometimes you have to get creative. And I have not had those come back, so.
They can.
Let's try and
but that's
stay
good
on
to
the
do.
ones that more of the neighborhood, that up to 250 neighborhood.
I'm sorry, I
No,
got a little out of it.
But to his
Yeah, so
point,
answer that question.
if he
Yeah,
goes
that
to
is the
bat
question.
and he goes that far out of the normal ranges of adjustments and distance and time, he's gonna have to support that, or the underwriter's gonna flag it, and the underwriter's gonna challenge it. The underwriter might even throw it out, so.
And I will support it, but if you've got a crappy redo and you're comparing it to, a John Lang home that's, totally high-end or whatever, it's just, I'm not gonna go there because it's not equal. But yeah, if you it's like a brand new house inside, yeah, and you're selling at the very upper end of that market, I will do what I can to support it if I really believe the value's there. So I've got to believe it myself, and I've got no problem going there. But knowing that, it may, the underwriter will come back. But I've also, in the back of my head, if I'm supporting that high number, I'm anticipating the underwriter's going to come back and question something. So I've got to have reasoning. If I don't have the reasoning, then they're just gonna shut it down, so.
Question in light of that, I want to address the realtors. In this situation, even in our level of marketing, do you find that you will have buyers for the one that's nicer done, it's a unique house, but it costs more money, or are the bulk of your buyers going for whatever is cheap and nice right now?
It depends on where it is. If you're somewhere like in the Highlands area, and you might be off the beaten path a little bit, but yours is way nicer, there's something unique about it, they might do it. But if you're up in Thornton, you know, standard neighborhood,
They're looking
cheap
for
and
cheap.
nice, and you know where they can say, look at my nice granite countertops in my $200,000 house. This is really cool, you know. But
Okay, so the people who are buying nice are 250 up, or up of
or
350.
350, you know, like
350 up, okay.
yeah. I mean, you can get into those older neighborhoods and find some really unique houses, but you have to have, you know,
Okay.
something really cool to make it stand apart, you know.
Okay.
You know, my view on unique properties, and it boils down to fundamentals within appraisal practice. You have situations where your house is in a regressive model. You have situations where it's in a progressive model. Think of it as being in a big fish in a small pond, or a small fish in a big
Okay.
pond. And the example you gave about, you know, a 3,000 square foot house in the middle of Harvey Park, that's a unique property that you guys as investors are going to come across. And the way to approach that, if you have the stomach for it, is say, okay, we've got a ranch in Harvey Park. The average size is 1,200 square feet. And somebody decided to pop the top on this thing and make it 2,400 square feet. Well, those comps don't exist in Harvey Park. The biggest mistake you can make is to try and go pull something in from Bear Valley that's of similar size. What you need to be doing in that situation is saying, okay, what is the most probable large size house in the neighborhood? Well, if you go into Harvey Park, the largest likely house you're going to find is going to be about 1,600 square feet. And so the market's actually talking to you in that situation, saying, okay, I'm willing to buy a 1,600 square foot house, but if I want a 2,400 square foot house, I'm going to cross Sheridan, I'm going to go into Bear Valley. I'm not going to do it in Harvey Park. And so what you're stuck with is 800 square feet of surplus size and value that is its value less than the largest predominant size house in that neighborhood. So you actually are hurting yourself. You're in a regressive model that way because you're overbuilt for the neighborhood. So that 800 square feet, let's say on a square foot difference, we might make a $40 a square foot adjustment for differences, you know, up to 200 or 300 square feet in above grade size. But once you start getting into that much larger value, or that much larger square foot rather, you might reduce that value to $20 a square foot, maybe even $10 a square foot, simply because that product doesn't exist in the neighborhood. And if you try and bring in comps from another neighborhood, you're going to sink yourself.
Sean, you mentioned to me a while back, we were talking about a neighborhood in I think it was Lowry, where you explained, and I want you to repeat that because it was really useful. Some neighborhoods will never be anything more than what they are, what they were designed to be when they were built. They're not, and there's exceptions like Crestmore and, you know, Bonnie Bray and certain things like that. But can you kind of repeat that?
Well, even Bonnie Bray, I mean, Bonnie Bray was Denver's first subdivision. It really was. I mean, it was planned with curved streets, and that's what it was. It was the first PUD, if you will, planned unit development in the city of Denver. But going back to you know, the intersection of Colfax and Yosemite is fascinating. What you have is 3 counties coming together in 2 cities. And what you also have out there is, historically, you had Fitzsimmons. And historically, you had Lowry Air Force Base. And that whole Aurora market was built around low-income military housing. And so you've got all this sexy development coming in with the Fitz redevelopment, and they rezoned Peoria Street, they rezoned Colfax, and all that's great long-term. And it created a lot of frenzy and activity in those neighborhoods, but those neighborhoods are still going to be bread and butter neighborhoods. You're never going to change that because that's how it was built. Bonnie Bray and West Washington Park, if you look at, not West Washington, but Wash Park proper, if you look at that neighborhood compared to Platt Park south of the highway, Platt Park was built to support the Dutch labor class that fed into Gates Rubber, back when Gates was the big employer of the neighborhood. Wash Park was built as a higher end product. Well, you look at the two neighborhoods today, and sure enough, Wash Park is still a higher end product than Platt Park. The market area has gone up, but those differences in neighborhoods haven't changed over time, and they're not likely going to.
Yeah, that's perfect. That was really helpful to me a long time ago, Charles.
I think by and large, a question or?
I was going to ask, what do you do, two questions. What do you do in a situation where, let's just say you have two adjacent neighborhoods, you know, you were saying you want, like, let's say you have a ranch in a neighborhood that it's a custom neighborhood, there's no ranch comps in the neighborhood whatsoever, and then you've got the anomaly ranch among a bunch of bi-levels in a very custom neighborhood, and yet you could go a half mile into another neighborhood that's a lesser grade neighborhood. Do you stay in the neighborhood, or do you go outside of the neighborhood for a comparable? Because, you know, like you have a pocket, let's say you have a unique house in Platt Park, and you find these beautiful comps that are half mile away over in Wash Park, but you don't want to.
I won't go there.
You won't go there, yeah, exactly. But
I just
how
won't.
How do you justify that to the banks when you're saying, I won't cross I-25 and go from Platt to Wash Park?
It's pretty
Different
simple.
world.
I mean, it's a different world, and we're fortunate in those neighborhoods to have a lot of volume of activity. But, you know, in your situation, and I honestly think it would take too much time to answer that question in this form. I can answer it offline, but you do both. Okay, you compare it against the bi-level in the neighborhood, and then you pull in the other neighborhood and you make your historic adjustments based on the value that one neighborhood has over another. And if you're doing both approaches, they're going to come together on the sales grid. And when they start supporting each other on the sales grid, if you've done your homework right, you're going to find the value of that property. But it sometimes takes two different approaches, sometimes even three different approaches to look at that, throw it up on the sales grid, make sure you're disciplined in how you're adjusting for location and time and these other factors. Those values will mesh at the bottom of your sales grid. They will, but it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to do that. It's not an easy chore there.
So, using the example you gave for like unique properties versus, you know, regular properties in the area, the flip side of that, like say you have a house that's, you know, surrounding that unique property, does that increase the value for those houses, or shouldn't you be able to increase the, you know, if I come in and I'm buying a house for $150,000 and it's around that unique property, shouldn't I be able to increase my after repair value a little bit based off of what they got going on? Even if I'm not pop-topping it like they did, shouldn't I still be able to push them up a little bit more there?
You could always try it, but
Yeah.
you'd be kind of,
Lots of rack.
Well, and
you'd be setting yourself up for some disappointment,
Yeah.
because a lot of times, unless you're, you know, a good example is in certain neighborhoods like Wash Park or, you know, some of the older neighborhoods where you're starting to have like the scrapes, you know, certain blocks where you can have the little house. If most of the houses are already scraped and you've got your big McMansions on them, you know, that little house, that lot is probably going to be worth more than you go 2 blocks over where there's not the big improved houses. So, you know, if there's a lot of that in your kind of the, you know, one small house around there, but if you're in a neighborhood and there's just lots of your house, and yet you've got this one house that's a big over improvement or unique, it's probably really not gonna affect you any more than it would affect the other comps. So if you've got these other sales, you're still gonna use those, and if they're selling at X price, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not really gonna affect you.
So I'm sorry, one more part to that. So then like the price per square footage, is that doesn't play a factor too much now? Like you know, if the envelope has been pushed to like 200 or something like that, I don't get that as a small house. I don't get nowhere near that range. With my approved value either.
Well, the thing is with appraisals and realtors, we tend to look at price per square foot differently, in that realtors are looking at what's your overall sales price. They're coming up with a price per square foot based on the overall price, whereas we're looking at it like we separate it out, because some of that price per square foot that the realtors are looking at when you're getting that $200 mark is everything. So it's land, everything. So whereas we're extracting out and we're looking at, well, what's just the house, what's the, you know, square feet there. So that's why those numbers are a little different. So
There's a fundamental bias when you look at the formula for cost per square foot. There's a fundamental bias, and that is the smaller the house, the larger the cost per square foot is. the larger the house, the smaller it is. It's the economy of scale that goes into building and the cost that goes in building. A small house will always have a higher cost per square foot than a larger house. It has to. That's the bias in the formula. The other thing, people say, well, how come you're not making $150 square foot adjustment? It's because it includes land, and land doesn't depreciate like a house. Land is static. There's a lot of factors. So when I made that comment earlier, I might adjust $40 a square foot or $10 a square foot based on the example in Harvey Park. That takes out the land. It takes out a lot of the depreciation. It takes out all those other factors. So if you're blindly looking at a property saying, gosh, cost per square foot, this house should be worth X based on the cost per square foot I'm looking at these other houses, you are setting yourself up for a catastrophic failure. I would strongly recommend that unless your sample of data is so tight, within maybe 200 square feet plus or minus, once you get beyond that and looking at houses, knowing that your land values are all similar, you're really going to go astray if you look at your cost per square foot that way.
And I think too, sorry, I was just going to say, I think too that as investors sometimes we all get into the thing of over-analyzing. You don't need to get it down to the nitty-gritty science like separating things out, because you'll spend more time trying to figure out what a property is, and with the way the market is right now, by the time you figure all that out, the house is going to be gone. So you need to, you have to make some quick decisions, not try to overwork it and see the exact amount that you're going to get, because you aren't ever going to get an exact
Real quick,
amount.
because we're getting real short on time, and I got one more question, then we'll open it up for everybody else. What's your take on unique property, real quick? And then
Stay away from them. You're asking about unique blood elephants, unless you're one of these guys right here, or that guy in the cowboy hat back
No, I
there,
can
and a
say
couple of
opinion,
other.
mine's passed, I wouldn't buy it.
Stay away from it. It's a
I'll
short
keep it
discussion
real
as far as I'm
short.
concerned.
Pass.
Cool.
Don't buy it.
Okay, my last question, and I hope I'm covering a lot of your questions by doing this. What are the top couple things that an investor can do to a property that will bring more money back, say they spend $1 to make $5, and what are the top couple of things that they would do to a property where they're going to spend $5 to make $1, where we're just wasting your money? So let's just do this real quick, and then we'll open it up to the rest of it.
Good question.
Where do you want to start?
Just do it this way.
Obviously, just your kitchens and your baths. Actually, spending some money there. It's not like you've got to do the really high-end cabinets inside, but to have the nice. To me, when I see these, even if they're a small ranch, I mean, it's nice to go in, and some of them have completely new kitchens, granite. Especially if they're selling at the top end of what's in there. I mean, there's some quality redos out there, and they're going to get, and they go fast. It's amazing. I mean, they even have bidding wars on them sometimes. Kitchens and baths, if those are all redone, the other thing I see is even redoing the basement. If you're in there, you've already got contractors in there, just updating that basement really kind of makes it where if it looks more like a new home, I mean, you get your can lighting in there, you redo the bathroom down there, because sometimes, that basement is just really
Dark and creepy.
Get rid of the wood
You can put a
paneling.
dress window in there, and then, and you've got new carpet, and you've redone the drywall, and you've got can lighting there, so it's bright. It's going to show really well, and kitchens and baths, obviously. I like to see, new windows are nice, but a lot of times I know you probably don't get your return on them from an appraisal standpoint. In the market, a lot of times it just doesn't show like a big, unless you can get them done fairly inexpensively. It is nice to see, especially if you're trying to compete at that very upper end. Just a little bit of tweaking in the landscaping, just freshen up things, whether it just be buying 5 bags of mulch and just, just making it, where it looks different. Because the other thing is a lot of times I'm looking at like, well, okay, you bought this for $80,000. 2 months later, now it's got a contract on it for $150,000. The more I see the change, because a lot of times I will talk about that, because then usually the banks and the underwriters are going to question that. So I'm going to kind of start listing down. So anything that you've done, and a lot of times investors or realtors will meet me there and just itemize, we've done this, and I'll talk about it, and I'll take pictures of everything that I can.
Yeah, just one of the biggest mistake I see in fix and flips is the failure to present a complete package to the buyer. And I'll give you examples of, I changed out my light switch covers, but I put new fancy white light switches, but I left the yellow dingy, 5 years of grime light switch in the wall. I didn't change out my floorboards. I put new carpet in, but my floorboards still have 8 years of 30 different colors worth of paint on them. You can really go a long way in making your house stand out by being as complete in your detail as you can, and you don't have to break the bank to do it. Switching out your dated brass light covers, your electrical fixtures, that will get it to shine. Switching out your doors. Sometimes the old doors are hollow core. If you have the budget to put in hollow core doors and satin nickel, that's the sexy new color right now in interior finishes. Don't leave the brass in. Try not to leave anything in the house that's going to remind people of how old it actually is. So be as complete in your details there. What's not going to get you a lot of money? Roofs. A furnace isn't going to get you a lot of money. A new electrical panel isn't going to get you a lot of money. But I will say this, if you have a Federal Pacific panel, you might have trouble selling the house because there is kind of a market expectation that the house be safe and functional. A roof needs to be minimally functional. Windows need to be minimally functional. In a fix and flip, I will not give house top dollar if it doesn't have new windows. I just won't do it. And you start seeing some of these details that are left out of the house, and as an appraiser I start to wonder, what else did they skimp on? This house isn't a complete package. Buyers are looking at it the same way. So if you can be as complete in your detail as you can, and that includes basic landscaping, don't go crazy. Basic landscaping will help your house stand out simply from curb appeal. People are going to drive by and go, ooh, they put detail in the lawn, that's the first thing they see. I got a brand new front door, I want to see beyond that front door because you're presenting a complete package. So be detailed.
Chairman?
I have a quick question. How much, and it talks exactly to that, so sorry to interrupt. How much do appraisers realistically actually know about what all those numbers really mean?
I don't care. I'll be honest with you. I'm out there appraising what the value is, and that's set based on the other comps in the market. So what your budget is going in to replace a house, I don't care what that is. I mean, you can show me a punch list, but what I'm doing is I'm comparing what you've presented as a finished product compared to what else is out there and selling. So if you meet me at a property, do me a favor, give me a punch list so that I can speak about those improvements. Hand me a package saying, gosh, I thought about this comp, and this comp. But don't come to me after the fact and say, oh gosh, by the way, I did this, this, and this. Have something ready for me, because we can be influenced if you've got your ducks in a row and can show us that you've done the work. We can be influenced in the right way to consider the proper comps.
So the follow-up to that is, how much do you think, if 6 of you were up there and you're the smartest people in this whole town, and we all agreed you were the smartest,
I like that idea.
how much change would there be between the highest and the lowest? Just because you're all professional, just like I'm good at what I do or whatever, and there's 5 other than me, I'd have a different opinion than the 5 other people that do exactly what I do. What do you think an average number for all of us to think about is, if, I guess I'm just trying to get a really broad spectrum idea of
10%.
10%? Okay.
Fannie Mae allows there to be a 10% variance in the way two appraisers look at a property. And that is a lot, but Fannie Mae is fine with that. And
It's
they've
actually going to be higher between appraiser versus realtor investor.
But
I think you're probably closer to 15 to 20% difference between what a realtor sees and what a appraiser sees. When we wrap this question up, I'm going to point that out. Why do you see that difference? Because we haven't got there yet.
Let's get to the end of the row so everybody else can answer first. And so, go ahead, Charles.
Everything they said is right. It's the basics, your kitchens, your baths, your landscaping, the obvious paint and carpet. I think it was Tom, though, that said you look at every other property, and one of you was going to be 2% nicer and 2% cheaper. That's really what you're trying to do. So you can't really answer the question. It has to be answered in the context of your competition every single time. And if you stick to that, you're probably not going to put a pool in the backyard, which would be a big mistake.
Don't put a pool in. Ever. I said the same things, good kitchen, have a nice, if you can make it so that there's a separate master bath in certain type of neighborhoods, it's for a selling point. People like it in curb appeal. And then the biggest thing for me that you can do that is cutting corners and also take pride in your work. Like, get your houses professionally cleaned afterwards. You're scrubbing it down and seeing dust, marks is not gonna help it sell. And, go middle of the road in the stuff that you buy. Don't buy the highest end stuff you can get, but sometimes the cheapest isn't always good either, Make sure that you'd be proud. If you had to meet the buyer out there, that you'd be happy to show them this house, that you wouldn't be like, oh, let's skip over this bathroom really quick that we didn't quite put the money into,
Tom?
Finishes, finishes, finishes. I mean, that's for me. I just walked into a house just a little bit ago, and I was wondering why it sat on the market for so long. And I walked in, and it had the 10-cent white square tiles. I can buy travertine marble and get it installed for about the same price he paid for that. And you're making a mistake if you're going to the cheap side, and you're going to go to Home Depot and find the absolute cheapest thing you can find in that store. Because they got the brass light fixtures for you, and the black metal ones, and the white ceramic tiles. But you can go other places, you can even stay at Home Depot and pay just a little bit more money and get something better. And that's what's going to sell your property, and not have it sitting around. The other thing is layout. I always change layout. I mean, when you're buying a house built in the 50s, the buyer today, unless it's a really cheap house, I just sold one that was a 1950s style, but it was $157,000, so they'll take whatever they can get at that price range. But as soon as I'm into that $250,000 price range, that buyer wants something a little different. They don't want their mom's house anymore. They want something, the master bedroom. They want that master suite. And then adding square footage, that's the thing I like to do. It's the easiest way to add some value is go buy that 1 or 2 bedroom house and make it a 3 or 4 bedroom by adding 400 square feet on the back of it.
That's where I create a lot of value for me, is I like buying a 1, 2 bedroom home on at least a 6,500 square foot lot, adding 400 feet plus a 2-car garage. And you open up a house, you get them to open their wallet. You want to modernize the floor plan. You don't want it to feel like the Brady Bunch where it's boxy. As you're walking through, there's a hallway, then a room. Open it up, add some arches, soften it up. Neutral paint colors. And if you're not good at picking stuff, keep it simple. Bring somebody in that is good. Ask around. Everyone knows someone that can decorate. I mean, I'm lucky I can match my clothes every day. So I certainly don't pay the colors. Keep it simple, black and white. Keep it simple. So I think the key is you want it to look expensive but be inexpensive. And a lot of people make mistakes. They think when they're doing these rehabs, they're doing it for their own home. I mean, Tom brought up an example for people. Why would you pay $180 for a Delta faucet when you can buy an American Standard that looks identical, but it's $45? Comparatively shop. I mean, that just be practical, and don't buy something that you would put in your own home. It's a business. You got to make money. Keep it simple.
Real quick housekeeping, has anybody not signed this? Can you guys pass this around and make sure everyone's got all the information on there? Thanks. Paul, do you have something real quick?
I want to tie something in together before we open it up for questions. It's one of the biggest basic differences. It took me like a year and a half of doing loans before I really figured out why there was such a big difference, because I also do my own fix and flips. I do it part-time, 3 or 4 a year kind of thing. But I'm going to steer these guys a little bit and get there. When you guys pull your numbers, you're going off the MLS, right? You got your fancy spreadsheets. I know, I've seen them all, where you fill it. But your base number that you start with a value is based off of what number off the MLS?
For buying a house or selling a house?
For when you're buying it to what you think the ARV is going to be.
Oh, the end ARV.
Yeah,
okay.
end ARV. What number are you pulling up from?
Well, I'm looking at only remodeled houses. So they already have to be totally.
But I'm getting more specific than that. You have the sales price. What number are you using? Are you using the sold price?
Sold price minus concessions.
Okay, so you're using sold price minus concessions. How about you?
Exact same.
What about you guys? When you guys are doing comps, are you doing... You're typically using sold price, really not looking at concessions much, right?
I use sold price, and then sometimes I still look what's active on the market, because every once in a while a neighborhood will go up in value within that short period of time, exactly. So or if there's nothing on the market, that's right around this house, you got to kind of look and say, okay, all these houses sold for this high amount, there's nothing on there right now. You know, can I still come in at that point, or do I need to come a little lower?
Okay?
Certainly sold price minus concessions. Why would you say we wouldn't use concessions?
Most realtors don't, actually. Most
Well,
of
list
them.
price,
But
well-
that's
Most of them.
deceptive.
Well,
Yeah,
here's
I know
here's
where
my
you're going
point.
with
Here's my point. Most realtors and most investors, myself included, I don't typically look at concessions. I write a concession number into my formula,
Right.
so that, you know, I'll look at the comps and I'll say, all right, here it is, and I take essentially 95% of that, and that's where I figure my number. These guys are doing a similar thing. The one thing that we get into, and when we do get into the head-butting valuation between what the appraisers come in at and what the investor thinks it is when the appraisers do this, and correct me if I'm wrong, they get right down to the nitty-gritty. I mean, concessions are there, everything. That house is not worth, you know, first of all, the number one rule, the house is only worth what somebody will pay for it. But ultimately, it's only worth what that person netted in their pocket. Okay? They paid $175. They paid, you know, $3,000 or $6,000 in commissions. They had another $5,000 worth of concessions that they gave the seller. So really, they only netted $165. And that's what the appraisers, when the appraisers' values come in at, they are net values. They are not your $175, I think it's going to sell for that. They are net values. So when you go look at that, when you're running your numbers, you can add a little more, because you can ask a little more than what they're saying it's going to sell, because that's what it's actually you're going to net, not what you need to start listing the price at. So I just wanted to make that, because it took me quite a while actually to start figuring that out when I started looking at data, because I go through the same thing. I look at all our loans, and I'll say just shy of 90%, we're like 89.9, something like that. Of all of the loans we've done in the last 3 years, those houses have sold within $5,000 of what the appraised value came in at, and what we came in at our value. And in a lot of cases, that means investors have taken a loss. We've got one guy right now, he's writing a $15,000 check tomorrow to sell a house. He was sold, his realtor was sold on the fact that it was $240. Appraisal came in at $210. This house sold today. 9 months later, finally he got the price down, sold at $205. That's, he's writing a big check because his realtor really thought it was going to be worth $240. And in the face of 3 different price points, all within $4,000 of each other, he still thought it would sell for more. So one of the points is if our values are off compared to yours, who looks at more houses in this room than anybody else? Right? I promise you, I look at more deals than anybody else in this room. Because I see everybody's deal that they submit. I see all of those loans. I know what those houses are worth. I know what they're selling for. These guys look at more deals than anybody else in the city. Appraisers will see more deals than anybody else. You can't argue that. You can look at it and you can say, all right, I don't like your comps, I don't like this, and there's a little room there, but there is not a lot of room. I'll tell you right now, if they come in low, there's a reason for it, 95% of the time.
I was going to say too, concessions are kind of a hot topic right now in real estate. Wouldn't you agree? Where, be careful the way that you word your concessions, because right now you can get concessions like prepaid HOAs and stuff like that, unless you specifically say as a seller that you will only allow it to get the loan. So, if you want to, if you think, go in there expecting to do $6,000 on a $200,000 house, the standard 3%, but the costs of getting a loan have gone down a little bit from what I've seen. So they're having to find ways to pull in to make that up for that concession for that buyer. And if you write that, that can save you some money if you're very specific in what they can use.
And also
that
remember,
for.
the concessions in the MLS are a function of our putting it in there. We're not always right, and some people probably
Some don't do it. I know
just
they
don't do it,
well.
right?
Several don't do it.
That's how
I've
it gets
seen
done. The listing agents put in the concession.
Yeah.
And concessions are never taken dollar for dollar. If you are being told that the adjustment is dollar for dollar on sales concessions, you're leaving money on the table. Because concessions are not taken dollar for dollar. And it's in every guideline, it's in USPAP, it's in Fannie Mae. All the banks have acknowledged this, FHA acknowledges this. If you are taking adjustments dollar for dollar, you are making a fundamental mistake in your adjustment calculations. So it's rarely dollar for dollar. It's usually much less than that. And if you're a seller, that much less means dollars in your pocket. So if you are just blindly factoring dollar for dollar adjustments, you're leaving money on the table. You don't want to be doing that.
Okay, let's go ahead and have audience questions.
When you run into these houses that are in a unique category, when do you stop adjusting? Is it at 25%? Is it 10%? When a comp comes up in the area, and you've got very few, so in this unique area, when does it stop? Because the CMA program in MLS doesn't stop. I mean, if you have a house that's twice as big per square foot, it's going to add all of that in at the same price. Where do you guys stop with those kinds of anomalies, basements or above ground?
I don't use the CMA stuff as often in the MLS just for that reason. Or you end up having to spend a lot of time adjusting for that, wouldn't you agree? I mean, basically what I will do is I will do a search, pull what I think is similar to it, email it an explanation to my client on why I think it's this. I don't use the CMA software
Do it the
because
exact same way.
yeah.
But
You
most
can't do
realtors
that.
are going to buy this do. That's where they're going to come down with the middle number almost every time in their offer. So my question to the appraisers is, when you have a unique house, when do you stop? Do you say at 25% over, it's not good? Did you use that number? One of you guys used that number earlier. Is there a place where you put adjusting or say that's not a good comp because the adjustment is over X percent?
You know, it's pretty clear in the guidelines that we have to write to. We are not supposed to, we can do anything we want as appraisers. If we break the guidelines, we simply have to explain why. But for a single item, the adjustment shouldn't be more than 10%. For your net adjustments, it shouldn't be more than 15. And for your gross adjustments, it shouldn't be more than 25.
Chase Bank actually, they want 10% and 15%. So we're finding that some of these banks are even tightening in, beyond what is normally accepted, and then when we go beyond that, we have to explain it. So I'm going to do, as far as dealing with a unique property, I'm going to do everything I can to try and find something that is as similar as possible. And I typically will keep going further out to try and find it, and then I'll try and take a look, are there neighborhood-specific differences, to then try and account for those differences. I'll do everything I can to try and get it, to find something like it. Yeah,
You guys kind of see you're making their job harder, you're making the underwriter's job harder by picking a unique property. The guys who are picking a lot of houses, they're just letting them go to the next guy. So that was kind of what I'm glad we brought that up. Yeah.
Can school districts say when a house has been permitted in college for evaluation?
School districts.
Two different things
Virginia
here,
Village,
right?
Bromwell, stuff like that.
Peoria,
Yeah.
Cherry
Yeah.
Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the west side of town, but typically, like where I'm at, the better the school system, the higher the price the house is.
Mm-hmm.
So, where the best schools are, you are less likely to find some fix and flips.
You can have
in
the
there.
same house in exact same square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms. In one school district, it can command $30,000 to $40,000 more than a different school district. Would you say that's overstating or somewhere close to what you'd see a lot?
Yeah, I like to say my adjustments in percentages instead of raw dollars.
Okay.
Because it's going to be different for every pair that you look at. But yeah, I mean, there's a section of Inglewood down off of Downing and Hamden where a lot of those homes are in the Cherry Creek School District, and you cross over to a street and you're back in the city of Inglewood School District. And there's a huge difference in the prices. And the houses are typically the same. And you cross over a block, and it does make a difference. Absolutely.
What about you guys? Mr. Thomas?
This is permitted.
Oh, permitted how?
Like
Well, it
finished
depends on
basement.
what you're doing, I mean, if, a lot of cities will,
From an appraisal standpoint, a lot of times we're not going to know. I mean, a good example would be a basement. The county shows no basement finish. You go there and there's basement finish. That tells you that it probably wasn't permitted.
Do you care?
But, well, I think a lot of times too, a lot of the counties seem to be backed up with not getting paperwork recorded because some of them have taken the approach, speaking of Inglewood, that they're gonna police everything and look to find people that aren't getting permits. And there's one house that we've been working on where we got a stop work order, even though all the work we're doing doesn't require a permit, you know? So it just depends on where you're.
I think it's less of an appraisal question, and it's more of a buyer-specific
Yeah.
question. Some buyers are going to want to know, and then we're going to have to negotiate. And sometimes we do work and we don't do permits, and we tell them that. But from what I know, it's not really a permit, it's not really an appraisal thing, it's right at the point of sale. And when they start asking for stuff, when the buyers start asking for stuff and going through the improvements, if they ask that uncomfortable question, can we have all the permits, and we don't have it, that's where it's going to get caught. So permits are really important, but I think it's more on that side, not so much on the appraisal side.
We do see it. I mean, absolutely. And you know, we'll look at a fix and flip house, and it has an addition. It's clear it has an addition, and we comment that, you know, the family room is a 400 square foot addition. The underwriter might be diligent enough to say, show me the permit numbers.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence.
No,
show me
I
the permit
haven't.
numbers.
I've just never run into that.
I
So
mean,
I'd like to know.
permitting, like,
happens.
get your important stuff.
Actually asked
Have
for
you?
permits.
Get
Underwriter?
your
Say
stuff.
again?
Yes. Say it again,
Yes,
Paul?
I've had, I'd say 50% of the time, I have underwriters, especially if it's FHA, they will ask for permits, they'll want to see the permits. They'll actually want me to print out a complete scope of work as well, which I keep in QuickBooks. And they'll want to know specifically how much I spent, checks and whom they went to, how much I spent in materials and labor.
And
They
they're
actually
looking
want
to-
a breakdown.
You
They're looking
said,
to document this
That-
increase in
that's more
value.
Your add-on.
yeah, that's what I was gonna
That's
say.
not my,
Those are on the, yeah.
I
was
get a
gonna
lot
say-
because
yeah.
95% of my rehabs are additions.
Okay.
That's
Right.
where, so I see it a lot more because I add a lot more value because they're like, well, you bought this property for 60,000, but you're selling it for 280,000. And all of them will get second appraisals. I mean, it's extensive, but I well document my rehab. And I've been through it so much, I know what the underwriter's gonna ask for now. So I almost have it in a little package ready to submit to my listing agent, who's gonna hand it to the buying agent, who's gonna hand it to the mortgage broker. So they know right from the get-go specifically what. I leave all my permits on the counter for the home inspector as well as the appraiser, so they can see there was a 1R pulled, electrical, HVAC, plumbing.
Yeah.
Any permit that I pulled for the garage, roof, is all on the counter, so when they do the appraisal and the home inspection, they can see I did everything correctly.
Yeah,
It's a
if
good way
you
to-
change out your electrical box,
Yeah.
get a permit, you know?
You have
I
to.
mean, that's,
That much.
you know, that's a real safety concern. You know, if you're changing out cabinets, somebody probably isn't gonna get hurt by that. But if you have somebody who does a hack job on your electrical, you are carrying a lot of liability there.
To Paul's statement, a good way to avoid getting that second appraisal is have that in the original submission package to the underwriter, along with all of the loan docs and everything else that goes in that first submission. So when that underwriter opens that file, they go, wow, they're not trying to hide anything. It's all right here. I don't have to dig. I don't have to suspect. I don't have to second guess. Yeah.
Along that same lines, if you've got a neighborhood, let's say, that's starting to get functionally obsolete as far as the stuff that's been done when it was built, and you're using comps that haven't had plumbing upgrades in the last 30 years, 40, 50 years, how do you justify that when you've got a brand new fix and flip that's had new HVAC, new plumbing, new electrical, everything's up to date, 2011 code?
You find the right comps. I mean, there are always going to be comps.
You're rarely going to be the very first one in a neighborhood. I mean, there's always a chance, but then, like I said, you go and you find as similar as you can.
Or like Tom said, I don't want to be the first one. Let somebody else do it.
For that reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope we're answering your question, but
Well,
I
you're
mean,
talking about, you know, the best bang for your buck for finishes for bathrooms and kitchens. And yeah, I'll agree with you 100%. But if the toilet won't flush, the toilet won't flush if it's a brand new, fancy toilet. If the plumbing's obsolete in that neighborhood, the plumbing's obsolete in that neighborhood.
you could make the argument that the whole neighborhood suffers from that obsolescence, and so it's not going to be unique to that house, and so that the neighborhood is impacted by that same issue. So there is no adjustment to your comps because they all suffer similarly.
Not if you, what if you, but if you just redone all the plumbing?
Well, it's specific to that house. I mean, the house is going to function, but you're not going to go through a neighborhood and 6 out of 10 homes aren't going to have flushing toilets.
Well, I understand that, but it's.
Because from a standpoint, we're gonna like, does the toilet flush?
I don't, yeah, I was
Doesn't
gonna
flush,
say
you know,
from.
I don't care if the pipes are 10
A lot of that-
years old or 30 years old.
Yeah, from an appraisal
It's
side,
functional.
they don't look necessarily what's inside the
Like
walls.
the
you
sewer
know?
line is a perfect example. I mean, you guys probably buy a lot of these houses and then, oh, sewer line. Now I gotta spend $6 grand, $8 grand
Always do
doing
a
a sewer
sewer
line.
scope before you
From-
buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
But from an appraisal standpoint, I can't necessarily give you more money because I'm not gonna, because I'm like, it's gotta have a sewer, it's gotta, you know, it's
Yeah,
gotta work.
it's the
People aren't gonna
functionality
care.
of the
Does it work,
house.
does not. From a buyer's perspective, it probably will make a difference, but I don't know if you make it.
In every report that I do, there's also a disclaimer that says I'm not an engineer and I'm not a home inspector. And so, you know, that's kind of beyond our expertise. And I'll even go so far as my disclaimer saying you should get this stuff checked out by somebody that knows how to do a proper inspection. I still don't feel I'm answering your question though.
Well, I'm gonna say from our side, very few buyers pay extra money for a new sewer.
Right.
They can care less,
Yeah.
they just assume it works.
Yeah. New
If
roof.
it's bad, put in a new one. It's
Yeah.
still the same,
It's
works the same
expected.
amount
Yeah,
for them.
well, anything I think that makes a house functional that you expect to have to live, running water, flushing toilet, heat, roof, aren't gonna increase the value. It's the pretty stuff that will increase the value.
You might
But
not
the
get
other has
knocked
to be
down
there.
as far
Really,
on your
when you
price.
boil it down, it's the emotional stuff that increases the value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People will pay
At
more
least the
for
buyer.
emotional gratification. You know, they expect the wiring to work, they expect the plumbing to work. They really don't even, most of them don't even know, all right, you know, it had galvanized, every other house has galvanized, and this one's got PEX in it. They don't know that difference. I mean, you know, a home inspector may say it and may kill your deal if you didn't replace it, but at the same time, they're not going in going, oh, well, this has got new plumbing, and that's not an emotional decision that they make. So it's not worth more.
By making everything up to code, because no one else is going to see it. So you put money into it to get the permits, because the buyer's going to question it. If they want the permits, they want everything up to code, they want it all working, but you're not going to get any money out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, your house just needs to be functional,
I have never
is
lost
really
it.
what it
I
comes
rarely
up
pull
down
permits. I
to.
mean, I do nice, you know, super simple. I'm not doing additions, anything like that. If I do egress windows, I'll pull permits. I do pull permits for my electrical boxes, you know, some of that kind of stuff, the roofs, things like that. But other than that, I don't pull permits. I don't pull plumbing permits and any of that. I have never lost a deal to that. I've had a few ask for it, and I said, nope, didn't do it with a permit. You know, and they're still emotionally involved enough in the property to say, hey, great, you know, all right, fine. We just know, you know, and that's where it goes. So I've never lost it. I've never had an underwriter ask for it either, so.
Can we just pause for 1 second? I'd like to bring up Mary Paz. First Integrity Title has sponsored this room for us, and I'd like to have her come up and introduce herself. I appreciate very much them providing this room and making this event possible for us. This is Mary Paz Parker. She's been my account rep at First Integrity Title for, 9 years or something like that. So, and they've got some good investor products, so just give her a few minutes to hear her out.
Well, I know that you guys are really excited about hearing about title, so I'm going to make it really, that makes everybody really happy. I'm going to make it short and sweet for you guys. First Integrity Title has been established since the 90s. I've been in the company for over 10 years now. We're the second largest owned and operated Colorado title company. We're owned by attorneys. Our attorneys work for the company. That is a huge plus for investors because if you have a transaction that you're insured of, they have some legal problems, you can always call our attorneys. They're very friendly, they're very knowledgeable, and they're going to help you with legal advice off the record. But they are going to help you, and that is a huge plus for the investors that I do business with. Another huge and very important thing that we have to offer is we offer full title commitments for your bidding at the public trustee. Other title companies only offer an O&E. You're fully insured with us. We offer a full title commitment before you do that. And we also offer continuing education. We have seminars, ongoing seminars on subjects that are important in this industry, like short sales, foreclosures, asset management, You know, and as a client, you can actually take advantage of that. We're really happy that you're here today. I'm going to leave my car outside, and please feel free to give me a call. We offer a lot of things and a lot of tools to increase your business as an investor or as a listing agent or selling agent. So we will be happy to take any calls and help you out with however we can. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? We just have a few more minutes to take a couple more questions. Yeah.
How do you handle expires that sell, so we look at comps, but then we have stuff that's expired, that's been, maybe below what the sales data supports, and we have stuff currently on the market that's in reasonably good condition. Can we use those as comps?
I don't ever use expired.
How do we handle those? Where it's like, okay, we haven't had a sale, maybe in a couple months, and then we've got a couple of them on the market that they're just not moving, and they're decent properties, and we have decent properties that have expired. How do we handle those?
Throw out your expired.
Yeah, don't ever use
It's the minutia of data,
expired.
Carl. I think
Tells
you're
people
looking
the
at too
price.
much data.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there is a point where you actually are going to start going backwards in your knowledge if you look at too much data. I can tell you
From the
myself.
guy that looks at more data than you.
Analysis.
Well, you have to limit it, and if there's if there's a bunch of houses that are expired in there, they were all overpriced and they're all thinking they could sell, or there's an issue with that neighborhood that's not being disclosed, because if nobody can sell a house, it could be one of those things where somebody gets under contract and there's a lawsuit, through the HOA or something. That's a big deal. A lot of people don't want to buy into that. So if there's a bunch of expireds, it might be worth looking into before you bought in there.
A question for the appraisers. I'm interested in what kinds of improvements actually add value. I thought I heard you say that egress windows in the basements to create a legal bedroom don't necessarily add value to the appraisal. Did I misunderstand?
No, that's.
It's not going to be counted as the same as an upstairs bedroom. It'll get some value.
The basements
but-
are always separate regardless of what's down there. I mean, it's always going to be separated. And a lot of times your price per square foot is different, whereas we might be looking at $40 a square foot on the main living areas. That basement square feet, depending on the market where we're at, looking at the comps, we could be anywhere from 5, 7, 10, 15
Where are these
bucks a
houses that are
I
$10
guess
a square foot, $40 a square foot?
Is it worth the money to?
Maybe not your
That's gonna
investment.
cost me to put egress windows in there.
I don't, what is
I need to drive the appraisal.
Yeah, but-
So I'm trying to say, what kinds of things can I do that is going to increase my appraised value after
I think what you gotta do is go look at what's going on in the neighborhood. That's what's gonna drive, you can't, I don't think you can drive to the appraisal, you have to drive to the neighborhood. And whatever's going on in the neighborhood, if every house in the neighborhood has egress windows, you're putting in egress windows, or you're sitting on the market. And that's what you gotta be looking at.
But you should explain why you're asking that question, because they don't know what you're doing. But if they know what you're doing, then they can answer it better. She's not trying to sell the property. She's trying to buy it with hard money and get an appraisal high enough to get a back end 2 or 3 months later, new loan, first lien, and get all her money back. So it's a very appraisal specific question.
It's a real
And you have to know
deal, yeah.
that.
So are you trying to rent it out? You're trying to
I'm
refi?
holding it for rental, so I'm
Okay.
So
buying
it's
with
all about the
hard
appraisal
money.
for her.
Yeah.
And the takeout financing is 75% of the new appraisal. So I'm thinking, okay,
Oh,
what
so
can I
everything
do?
you want that
to
appraisal
drive
to buy.
that
Appraisal
appraisal up?
specific.
Will putting in, replacing windows make a difference?
I wonder if you.
Well, they said a rental appraisal is different. Like you said, with an egress in the basement.
A rent survey is different than the sales
Yeah,
bid.
this would be
But
the appraisal
my-
for the takeout loan.
That's right.
My comment earlier goes for any seller, anybody trying to get the max value out of your house. We can be influenced by what we see. If you're going to present a house that's completely redone with details, we as appraisers are more likely going to give you the benefit of the doubt towards the higher end of the value range than the lower end of the value range. So help yourself by paying attention to the details in the house. If that means putting in an egress window to give your house the most complete package to the neighborhood, then put in an egress window. Don't leave that up to a random appraiser. Make sure that you're presenting the best thing that you have so that there is no doubt. And give that appraiser a list of all the improvements that you've done.
Okay, it's my understanding that lenders and whatnot can no longer meet the appraisers at the property.
Lenders can't, but the
Can.
listing agent, the
Agent.
buying
You
agent.
can do whatever you want.
The buyer, the
You're a member
seller,
of the public.
everybody but the
I can
loan
use
officer
you.
can go
Do
there.
you welcome comps
Yeah,
from
I
the,
can
from the
too.
investor?
That's a good question.
Like, do you welcome that if they leave it out or they talk to you about it? Or
Milk and cookies.
is that something?
I think if you're gonna do that, it would probably be good if you put your agent's name.
No, what if
On
they're
it
doing a refi? But I'm a lender and I
Okay.
refinance borrowers out immediately after the rehab. I'm from Pembroke.
I know.
Yeah.
Hello,
So
Pamela.
that's what, so they're trying to get the best value they can because they want that 75% in there. So they want the appraisers to understand what they did so it doesn't get knocked down.
I
I'm
don't-
just wondering if that helped you or if
I
that
don't
annoys
mind,
you.
yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, obviously, yeah, there's gonna be you can tell the ones that are there and they're just anxious and they're trying to, we can be, when I say we're influenced by looking at the details, by having stuff that says, look, we've done all this. We're pretty good about going through and not missing things, but if we're kind of, there's gonna be things that we could miss. So if you've done stuff that might be underneath that we don't necessarily know about, like replacing the sewer line, or you've done, some other things like you redid electrical, little things like that. If you wanna point that stuff out, I've got no problem.
Would a new roof help too? And
A list.
paint?
Yeah, I mean, just a list of everything.
Make a list.
Yeah, because then we know that we're gonna kind of itemize that out, because in the appraisal, that sold for 90,000 2 months ago. Why is it worth now? Why are you saying this thing is worth 150?
Does the purchase price that they just bought it for a couple months ago going to influence you?
It will.
Even if you have good comps?
I don't, if they bought it for 90 and you've redone it and the house is, there's
Or
other comps all
140.
going for 500,000, as much as that doesn't make sense, I mean, if all the comparable data says the people are paying 500 grand for these houses that were 90,000, it's worth 90,000 because that's what people are paying for it. But it's there because it's going to be in the appraisal. The
Okay.
banks, the underwriters are going to see it. It's going to be in the back of our mind. And what I see sometimes is if you buy a house for 90,000, you put paint on it and put new carpet in there. I know that you've only spent $2,000 on it. Now you're trying to sell it for 150,000. The only comps that are supporting the 150 are the ones that are completely redone, down to new electrical. Everything's done. They've got the egress windows. I'm not going to come in at 150 because I know you've got.
But what if they're not? What if they're the same? If they still didn't put much in it because they just
Bought it right.
got it really cheap through an auction or by luck or by a good wholesaler?
Those happen, but I mean, I gotta say more often than not, the perfect gem of a house isn't gonna sell for $90,000 in that scenario. The bank's gonna know that it has an asset that's been maintained and it's gonna sell for a little bit more.
I mean, there are properties that are like that. I mean, and
Yeah,
they do
right.
refinance them. I'm just trying to figure
And maybe
out
they're
how you
non-arms like
analyze
deals
that.
to begin with or
Hope they
something.
are.
Yeah, and there are,
Yeah.
because I know that there are situations where someone knows someone at the bank and they get, I'm like, wow, how did you get this so cheap? It's just that there's a connection. They knew
Right.
it, the house never went on the market.
Right.
And they just get them really, they buy very well. And yes, and as long as the comps support, it's new and it supports 150, there's nothing for me to say, well, this house is only worth 130 because they paid 90.
Okay, so you will
I can't,
try to
I've got no
look at-
logic for that,
Okay.
yeah.
Just,
But it's
have
gotta be
this-
apples to apples, so it can't be new paint, new carpet is equal to the one that's got the
Right.
brand new kitchen, granite and everything
Okay,
else.
but maybe
so.
10 grand lower or 15?
Well,
All right,
you know.
well, I have a client in here, I'm not gonna mention any names, and we had to order 2 appraisals and they came $45,000 difference.
Wow.
Why would something like that happen? What does that mean? Just your opinion.
Was it me?
Okay, we're done.
No, not you two, I know that, but I'm just curious, and she wanted some answers.
If they're that far
What
off,
you thought was-
really, as an appraiser, obviously, we're gonna have different ideas and I'm sure like I said, we're gonna be different, we're gonna be off. $45,000.
90 to 140 was the difference.
Yeah,
Is that right?
somebody screwed up.
Yeah, that's when you ask
Somebody,
for
I
a
don't know which
third.
one did, but somebody.
You fight for your third. And you hope to God that it wasn't FHA.
Exactly.
You pray to
Yeah,
every real estate god you
Somebody
can
screwed
think
up. One of them screwed up. I don't know if it's the higher or the lower.
They-
That's a
FHA
big
takes the
answer.
lowest of
We
the
are,
two.
we're pretty much out of time. Is it 6
Okay.
o'clock? What time is it?
Sorry, all right, thank you.
6 o'clock. I want to do one more thing,
Yeah, we have
and if you guys want to stick around a little bit longer, but I know Mariposa has to close down the office space. Can you guys want to give your contact information, or do you not want to do that? What do you want to do? If you want to, state your name and how to get a hold of you if you want to be reached, and we can go down and do that, so, because I didn't do that in the beginning. And then if you want to, work with anybody in here and they can get a hold of you and work with you as an appraiser or a realtor or an investor, wholesaling to them, what have you, go ahead.
Well, I've got some business cards. My name is obviously James Holcomb, like I said before. My number is 303-506-6827, I believe in my number. I'm actually very busy. I don't do a whole lot of investor stuff, but I've done some work with hard money lenders, and then I kind of cover the whole Denver metro area and just the full range, whether it be the higher end stuff versus the lower end. You guys are probably all pretty specific on what you're doing. But yeah, I have a few realtors that work with me that actually do call me in when they're going to list a difficult property. They use me as backup. They're like, they have in their head and they're dealing with a seller that doesn't want to believe the truth. They'll have me come out and, yeah, because the truth hurts. And then having an appraisal, they can go, this is what I think, this is also what an appraiser thinks. And then it gives them a lot more ammunition to actually price the property well, rather than giving in to a seller who insists on a property being
That could be money well spent. Okay, Sean.
Sean Marshall, my website's easy to remember. It's gotogus.com. And my phone number is even easier to remember. It's 303-722-2225. And, using the pre-listing appraisals, if you need help in setting a price before you sell your house, I got to say, I can be the bad guy. Appraisers make terrific bad guys with your unrealistic sellers because we help set the expectation. We give you a document, and you can fight with your realtor all day long on what you think your house is worth, but we give you a document that says it's worth X, not Y, and then we just kind of float away. We'll answer a few questions here and there, but as a realtor or as a seller, you've got something that is trying to convince somebody else that the house is worth X. It's a great sledgehammer.
Charles Roberts, my number is 303-523-3837.
My name is Portia Riddle. You can reach me on my cell, 303-720-1772. And I have my cards up here, so you can take those as well.
Tom Spaeth, I've got my cards right here. I've also got some flyers from my wholesale company if you want to log on there, and I have a email list on that. When I find properties, I email people out. I'm always looking to partner up with people, so if anyone wants to partner on a fix and flip, give me a call and we'll see if we can do something together. Thanks.
My name is Paul Schimmel. My cell number is 720-261-6014. Email is paulflipshouses@gmail.com. Can I give away my secret sauce? And my website for my wholesale company is denverrehabdeals.com. I have cards here, and I don't partner too much anymore, but I'd be more than happy to give advice. And I'm trying to actually buy 6 properties right now, so if anyone has properties, please call me. I'll take them off your hands. So I'm trying to buy a bunch. It's
What part of town?
Denver or Inglewood, one of the two.
Yeah, I could
No, hold on.
definitely
Won't
use
do
some
both.
too
Yeah, give them
for
to
my
me, not
clients.
to them.
So I'm looking for properties right now if anyone does have any.
All right, out of respect for your time, if you need to leave, feel free to leave. If you want to stick around a little bit and ask me questions.